Hello my darlings. So today I'm going to be talking about something very personal to me, and as you can tell from the title, this is going to be quite an open video. We're just going to be honest and just talk from my heart and be the most real that I've ever been on my channel. First of all, I haven't been making videos on my channel because of my anxiety, and I don't feel like I can continue to make the videos that I want to make on my channel without first getting the truth off my chest. And I used to always be really afraid to talk about something like this because I didn't want anyone to think that I was crazy. I just really wanted to come off as really strong and positive, which is who I am as well. I am strong and I am a positive, happy person. But the thing is happiness and, bubbliness and positivity can coexist with anxiety. That's been something that I've been dealing with for a really long time, and just lately it's been really bad. So really me making this video is a need for myself, because I don't feel like that I would be authentic on my channel if I just kept making those happy, positive videos, because I feel like I would just be totally faking my happiness. I don't feel like it's healthy for the mind or the body just to bottle things up inside. And even if I did try to force myself making these videos, and trust me, I have thought about just forcing myself into it and putting on this mask, but I feel like you guys are way too smart for that and you just would see right through me. So here I am about to have the most real conversation with you guys that I've ever had with anybody else. And I really do mean that. You guys are getting the raw version of my feelings today. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about how I got anxiety, the type of anxiety that I have, and then I'm going to get into the techniques and the tips that I have on how to cope and make your anxiety feel less severe. So the first time that I actually started talking to a psychiatrist or a therapist, which I haven't done since I was a kid, was when my mom and my dad divorced. Now, to clarify, I technically have a biological dad and I technically have a stepfather. But keep in mind, my stepdad is my true, real dad in my eyes and the only true father in my life. So now you guys know that I will be referring to my stepdad as my dad, and I will be referring to my biological father as Jim, for privacy reasons. And I'll actually get into the reason why I feel this way later in the video, because it does contribute to my anxiety. So before Jim and my mom divorced, I constantly heard fights and arguments, with my earliest memories being around 2 or 3 years old. And even though my mom and Jim were fighting constantly, they thought that I didn't know what was going on just because they were in another room, but I could actually tell from the beginning that these fights were getting very physical. Which brings up a really good point, you guys. Just because you're fighting in another room than what your kids are in, and you think that they're not going to remember or that they're not paying attention, that is far from the truth, because they know when it's getting aggressive, they know when it's getting physical, and it's going to scare the shit out of them. And trust me, it's going to haunt them and stick with them for the rest of their lives, even though you think that they're way too young to store this memory away. And even if you think that they're not paying attention, they are, and they're scared. Because even if I didn't see the evidence of physical fights, which I did see a lot of, the fear and the terror that I felt in my body, that feeling will always stick with me. I will always remember that feeling. And that really does trigger a post-traumatic stress, because every time I hear like fights or arguments now, it takes me back to those times and I start getting this like overwhelming anxiety attack. I'm not gonna get into all the details about all the horrible things that I witnessed that no child should ever see from their parents, because this video would be way too long if I told you all of those stories. But if for some reason you guys think it would be helpful, or if you guys have gone through something similar and you want to hear the story, just let me know. But my mom and Jim ended up divorcing, which, because they were a couple of hot-headed personalities, it was definitely the best decision for everybody involved. But now these two hot-headed personalities were in the middle of a divorce and a custody battle. These two were never the types to set their differences aside for the sake of the child in the situation. And I remember them constantly bickering over every little thing every time that I would either get picked up by Jim or when I would get dropped off back at home. And one day it got so bad that I remember either getting picked up or dropped off by Jim, and my mom and Jim started fighting in my front yard, and they were going back and forth in a screaming match, and they were screaming at the top of their lungs. And I just remember feeling so overwhelmed, so scared, and just so embarrassed, because my mom and Jim were fighting and screaming at each other in front of everybody that was on our street. And it was just such a loud fight that I know that if people weren't standing outside just watching them anyway, they were looking out through the windows, looking out through their doors. And I was in the center of this, and it was just not a good thing for a kid to be in the middle of. And I just remember bawling my eyes out, and I remember my chest tightening up to where I felt like I couldn't breathe. And I think I was probably in 3rd or 4th grade at this time, and I remember my mom and Jim like sitting me back down in the van and trying to calm me down and giving me a glass of water. And now that I'm older, I think back and I realized that that was my first anxiety attack that I had when I was in like 3rd or 4th grade. So between then and growing up, I didn't realize that I had something called anxiety. I didn't know what the word was until I grew up, but I always had moments where I would feel uneasy or anxious. Through my teen years, I got really depressed and hopeless, and I'm not proud to say this, but even though I had my mom and my dad, I felt pretty neglected by Jim, and I became the girl who had daddy issues and not feeling loved enough and feeling that I needed a boyfriend to replace that love that Jim took away from me. Again, whole nother story that I could talk about for like the girls that may have daddy issues, just to hear from somebody that went through it and some things that I wish I had known back then. But I don't know, maybe the anxiety and depression was just my teenage hormones that I was going through that, you know, a lot of kids go through at that age. But as most of you know, I did have my beautiful daughter Lexini when I was 16 years old. And let me tell you, just being a parent will bring out a whole new world of anxiety for you. So pretty much my anxiety was semi-tolerable between ages of 16 to 20 and would get really bad when I started to drink coffee. But anyway, when I was around 22 years old, my grandma got really sick, and then she was diagnosed with cancer. By the time they found it, it had already spread all over her body, but sadly she ended up passing away later that next year. And then about 3 or 4 years after that, my dad got really sick. And the one man in my life who was like always there for me, who was there through my ups and downs in childhood, and the one who like helped me with my daughter and going through all that, he got sick too. They ended up diagnosing him with cancer also. And a couple of years later, he passed away. He was the rock to our whole family, the provider, you know, just the rock, you know, the one that everybody depended on and that he was always doing things for. And it's like, he didn't deserve it. And when this happened, I was completely heartbroken and devastated and just feeling so sorry over like what he must be going through in his own mind and how lonely he must feel. And when my mom told me that my dad was crying in the doctor's office because he said that he won't be able to watch his daughters grow up, I can't imagine like the feeling that just hurt me on a level that I've never felt pain before, because that's my worst fear. And I think that any parent would say that that's their worst fear. So my dad ended up going to heaven and eternal peace in December of 2014. And I actually made a video montage a couple of months after just to help myself like heal. It's one of the first videos that are on my channel. I'll link it down below in case, you know, anybody wants to watch, because all the sickness was around me and such serious illnesses within a short period of time. I started to Google my own symptoms on the internet because I was so curious, how could such a sickness only be discovered when it's so late? I was obsessed with that thought in my mind. I obsessed over why the doctors didn't catch this beforehand. Once you get into that part of the internet, researching your symptoms, it's really hard to get yourself out of it. And then one night I woke up because I felt like I got bit by something on the leg. And so I went into the bathroom and turned on the light to look at it. And my leg had a bite on it, but I went into instant panic mode and assumed that a deadly spider bit me. So I threw up in the toilet. So because I threw up in the toilet, I started thinking, oh, the venom or the poison is probably in my bloodstream making me throw up, instead of realizing that people can actually throw up from fear alone. I went into a full-on panic attack. I was shaking, my heart was beating so fast, my chest was tightening up. I swore I was having a heart attack, so I asked Chris to take me to the emergency room, and they checked me, they checked the bite. There was nothing wrong. It was just a bug bite. So after this, I went through a period where I would check my pulse every 10 to 15 minutes. So crazy, I know. I was aware of every little sensation in my body. And I gotta be honest, I went to the emergency room a lot. Every single time, turning out to be nothing wrong. Unfortunately, because of an experience that I had when I was 19 years old, I actually had my appendix removed. And this was during a period where I didn't have any sort of like health or bodily anxieties. I remember before they actually found out that I needed my appendix removed, the doctor told me that he didn't think that there was anything wrong with me and that I was just having stomach cramps or something. So that didn't leave a very good impression of doctors in my mind, and unfortunately, because of that one incident, I have a hard time trusting doctors. And that doesn't help somebody like me that needs reassurance. So about my recent bout of anxiety. I have been dealing with my anxiety pretty well and haven't really had much anxiety at all until last month. In March, I actually had an ovarian cyst rupture and I had to go to the emergency room. 8 months before then, I had another hemorrhagic cyst, which ended up going away after that. So this recent one freaked me out because I'm like, why do these cysts keep happening to me? And with my crazy mind, now I'm thinking all the worst case scenarios in my mind. So for a good couple of weeks after my ovarian cyst ruptured, I started to go back into my old routine of researching and reading about the possibilities. I had to stop myself and tell myself that worrying and researching is doing myself more harm than good. Not only is researching and reading everything pointless because it's impossible to diagnose yourself by reading something, the fear and stress that I'm giving myself is just releasing all these bad responsive chemicals into my body that can wreak havoc on my entire system. So the reason why I haven't been wanting to make videos for the last month is because I feel like if I stop worrying and try to move on and ignore my fears, that something bad is gonna happen. Doesn't make any sense. No, it doesn't. It sounds so stupid, so irrational. It doesn't make any sense. I know that psychologically that my thought patterns don't make sense. It's kind of like, it's a very twisted kind of way of processing information that unfortunately I know it has to do with the things that I witnessed as a kid and the anxiety and the stress that I've had to deal with pretty much my entire life. I know that a very high percentage of people in the US statistically have anxiety. It's just so much more common than a lot of people like to admit. If you have it, you're not alone, you're not crazy. It's something that I'm really trying to understand myself every single day and learn to retrain my brain. I really do want to see a therapist or a psychiatrist or psychologist, whatever I need. And I know a lot of people are ashamed to do that and admit that. I read a Kerry Washington quote the other day that said that I go to a dentist to take care of my teeth. Why wouldn't I go to a psychiatrist to take care of my mind? I'm not the type of person that would take medication for this. I'm an all-natural type of person, which I'm trying to gear my channel towards that direction as far as health of the mind and body, because that's what I'm passionate about right now. I want to go through cognitive behavioral therapy just to kind of train myself to find a different pattern and a different way of processing things that I'm fearful of. The amount of information that I've I've immersed myself in over the past few weeks. I've actually learned a lot. Exercising really helps. Honestly, I'm not just saying that. I know that a lot of people say that exercise helps. There's a chemical response that your body gives when you exercise. It's only science, because it's like that Elle Woods quote.
Exercise gives you endorphins. Endorphins make you happy. Happy people just don't shoot their husbands. They just don't.
Yeah, the chemical endorphins, which gives like this happy response and feeling in your body, is released when you work out. That can counteract cortisol levels, which is the chemical that's released in your body when you're stressed and have anxiety. If you focus on depleting that level of cortisol in your body that gives you that flight or fight response with exercise, just some high power, like just running for 30 minutes and working out and doing weights for like another 30 minutes, just at least working out an hour a day, 5 days a week. A lot of people might be going through what I'm going through, and I want to help, because it's a shitty feeling. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and there are ways to pull yourself out of it. And I really do want to elaborate more on that, and like positive thinking, what you think about, you bring about type stuff, health of the mind and the body. But yeah, this is a video that I had to make for myself. It may not be interesting to a lot of people, but it's something that I needed to do for me. So thank you so much for everybody that watched it all the way through. I just want to say that I love you, and you guys are my friends. I love this community. I will comment back to each and every one of you, and I will try to help any of you as much as I can. So feel free to reach out to me commenting, or if you guys want, I can even set up an email address for you guys to send me some letters, and I can, try to help you as best as I can and give you as much advice as I can, and hopefully you guys like that idea. Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. As always, I love you darlings very much, and I will talk to you later. Bye, darlings.